Every day, children are exposed to harmful chemicals in toys, food, clothing, and more. Marty Salt reports on the effects that common toxins have on children.
Everywhere you look, there are dangerous chemicals that can affect your kids' health.
I don't even know if pollution's it. I think it's the products most people are making.
There's like 10,000 extra additives and chemicals in foods that weren't even there 40, 50 years ago.
I know microplastics is the big thing right now, but no, I think water is the chemical that you're exposed to the most.
One study found 25% of children's toys contain harmful substances. There are more than 80,000 chemicals used in the toy market alone, most of which have not been regulated or studied. A recent study also showed even low-level lead poisoning can have a severe effect on a child's health. Researchers found about 5.5 million deaths from heart disease are attributed to low-level lead poisoning, and it accounts for a loss of 765 million IQ points in all children.
The main thing that people are concerned about is neural development.
Lead is often found in construction materials, plumbing, soil, and car batteries, and it's typically a problem in houses built before 1978. Research shows about 3.6 million American homes with at least one child have significant lead paint hazards.
No amount of lead is a good amount of lead.
To keep your children safe, test older homes for lead. Also make sure indoor air is free from smoke, dust, and mold. Check the labels of toys and other household items, and provide plenty of ventilation to avoid inhaling these substances. With ways to protect your child from toxic chemicals, I'm Marty Salt reporting.